Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, gadgeteers, and welcome to yet another perfect podcast. It's the one where we talk about tech from the wide world of the foreseeable future, and is, of course, time for a little tech talk with Matthew Dickerson. Now, in today's episode, we're giving you a guilt-free license to ditch the instruction manual, all of them, and when it all turns to fuzz, we'll just land on a little AI to clean up the mess, huh? And we're going to check in on hydrogen-powered flight to see where it's at as it emerges from the chrysalis. And we're taking on robots. This time it's across the ping pong table, and things are about to get heated. And to take us through all the details, welcome to the microphone, it's Matthew Dickerson.
So is there a bit too much pressure on us there? The perfect podcast? Wow.
Oh, no, we're there.
Happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, right, I'll run with it then. Sure, this is going to be perfect.
Even the gaffes are perfect.
They're planned, aren't they?
Yes.
I don't know of any gaffes that are
Absolutely.
made.
My stuttering and fumbling, yeah, no, for sure.
It's all planned to give it that homey feel, to give it
The
that
edge.
real feel.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, folks, it's time for us to pay out on which we have promised. We do live in a world where lifestyle is scored in terms of status symbols. Just how big is your biggest flat screen TV, folks? What sort of connectivity does your fridge allow? How many Roombas do you have? And now the big question, what can your smart mattress do that mine cannot? Matt, what is the latest in smart mattresses?
I'm going to talk a little bit about this smart mattress, then I'm going to hit you with the price tag at the end.
Okay, all right. Yeah, don't lead with it.
And I'm sure some people are going to have a bit of a heart attack when they hear the price tag.
Can I just ask, do you have a smart mattress yet?
I don't have a smart mattress
neither
yet.
do I.
No, I feel like I'm a bit behind the times
No.
already.
It's only a matter of time.
Exactly.
Now, everyone's about to hear about this, so they'll all be rushing out to get them.
Exactly. Now, the thing here is that we spend, maybe a third of our lives sleeping. So we probably spend more on our TV for an hour or 2 hours, whatever we might spend watching the TV each day. But the mattress, people balk at spending money on a mattress. But they shouldn't, because we do spend so much time in the mattress. Maybe we should be spending a lot more money on it. So let me tell you about this mattress now before I hit you with the price tag. The first thing is, and it's obviously designed for people that live in a partner relationship, whatever that partnership looks like, because it's got separate controls. And I do have the problem sometimes with my darling wife where I'll be laying there with a doona on, it might be in winter, and of course then the doona comes off because my wife might feel a bit hot, or there might be another blanket goes on her side because she's a bit cold, or it's always that constant.
It's a game.
It's a game, that's exactly right. So this particular mattress, for a start, has independent temperature control on both sides of the bed.
Of course it does.
That sounds pretty good. Your base temperature, which I found interesting, was 27 degrees. I thought that would have been a bit too warm. Yeah, but that's the base temperature.
Yeah, I think about what the air temperature that our air conditioning is set to in the evening, because that's how we keep warm.
Yep.
And it's well below that.
24. If I walked into a motel room and it's 24 on the wall, it normally feels a bit hot. So I'd
that's
normally
right.
think maybe 22.
Knocking it down to 22. Yeah, for sure.
So 27 seemed warm to me, but maybe you don't want a doona on top. Who knows? But you've got 10 increments above and 10 increments below that.
Wow, that's a hot bed to go to what? You're saying 37 degrees Celsius?
Well, I'm not sure that each increment is exactly 1 degree Celsius.
Could be half a degree.
Could be a bit.
Yep.
So is that a technical enough term? But there's 10 increments to go above that and 10 to go below that.
But it starts off at 27.
That's the base, they're saying. So
okay.
that seems pretty warm. And then from there, of course, the mattress is connected to Wi-Fi. You've got to pull your phone out to then adjust the temperature up and down. And I'm seeing lots of fun you could have here if you've had a bit of an argument with your partner. Then you can just crank up the temperature. Take that when you wake up.
It's just going to make them crankier.
That's right. That might be worth it, or maybe it won't be. So that's the first thing. You've got individual temperature control. You can set it and change it on each side with your app on your phone. So that's fine. Then you've also got a motorized base, and it can adjust automatically the head and leg elevation to try and reduce snoring. I'm not sure how the leg elevation works for snoring, but the head, I get that. It might lift up the head ever so slightly. So they say at this stage with the testing they've done, they can reduce snoring by 69%.
And of course, so your partner adjusts that while you're sleeping.
Probably.
Yeah,
I think it's actually meant to be automated. I think it listens out for you snoring and then just might lift up the head ever so slightly.
That is smart.
That is smart before your partner even wakes up. Now, of course, the motorised base also has the ability to vibrate. So to wake up in the morning, it can just vibrate the bed. Now, that's okay if you both get up at the same time, but I can't imagine it can vibrate one side and not the other, so that it's time to get up. Well, it's time to get up for you, but not for me. Thanks very much for vibrating the whole bed. More importantly, what it does is it monitors, without wearing any wearable device, it monitors heart rate, breathing rate, your movement and your snoring to give you information in the morning about the quality of your sleep. Once you've got all that information, you can maybe change some things, do some things to maybe make your sleep better. But in the testing they've done so far, it's been able to increase REM sleep by 8%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 8%, that's not too bad.
Any increase is good increase, I think, isn't it?
Well, I think so.
Well, perhaps too much increases probably leads to death, but anyway.
Well, that's right. Maybe if you sit there forever. So it's not advocating for that, obviously. So it's got tiny medical-grade sensors in the bed itself to monitor what's happening and give you this report.
Wow.
So all sounds pretty impressive. So with all of that, you'd expect the price tag to be
just a couple of hundred.
More than that, maybe.
Right,
So
okay.
$4,200 for the base model,
right?
$6,600 with the one with the motorised base.
It'll make your breakfast as well.
Yeah, almost. It'll at least have the bread warm enough to cook eggs in, maybe. So I know when I first saw that $6,600, I went, no one's going to buy that. And then I did start thinking, I thought, well, we do spend a lot of time in the bed, so surely it's worthwhile spending a bit of money on.
And if people really love their sleep, then they'll pay the money, won't they?
Possibly.
I think it's the old adage of build it and they will come, but we'll wait and see. In a bid to draw more business, OpenAI, I'll say that again, in a bid to draw more business, OpenAI is opening the door to entice, impress and lure in the AI tentative. Some features that were previously only available to subscribers are now being released in the free version of ChatGPT. Matt, what's on offer to hook the boomers now?
Well, the DALL-E, which is their generation tool in OpenAI, I played with DALL-E a little bit before it was integrated into ChatGPT, and you'd ask it for an image. You'd say, give me a purple horse flying to the moon, and it would give you something like a purple horse, but it would give you 4 options, and you'd choose the one that you wanted out of those 4 options, and it seemed to do a reasonably good job in terms of creating some image, whether it be a cartoon or lifelike, whatever. They then integrated that into ChatGPT, and I use a subscription model, so I can go in and just say, give me a picture that looks like this, and it seemed to work. It just gives you the one picture, but the big issue I had with it when you found that one picture was it seemed to not take feedback that well. So you'd get the picture, you'd say, it's not too bad, but could you just change this and this and this and give me a new version? DALL-E, when you use DALL-E natively, that seemed to respond quite well to feedback. But when you use ChatGPT, it just seems to ignore feedback. So I had an example. I was only using it this afternoon, and I wanted to draw a picture for a certain article. And I said, give me a picture with this, this, and this. And for some reason, it decided that it would like a British flag in the picture. So a Union Jack.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, that's lovely if I'm based in England, but I'm not. I'm based in Australia. So I just said, quite politely, I like the picture. Thanks very much, because I'm still being nice. But could you please remove the flag?
It's got feelings.
Yeah, that's right. And it came back and drew a picture, basically the same, with 2 flags of British origin. So I was thinking, did you not understand? So I actually said, with a bit of tone in my voice, well, a bit of tone in my keyboard, I said, I asked to remove the flag and you seem to have added an additional flag. Did you not understand my instruction? Can you please remove the flag? And I drew another picture for me, back to 1 flag of British origin.
British origin. It only knows 1 flag.
Well, apparently that's it. So it was a little bit frustrating, but having said that, it sounds like I'm a bit annoyed with it, but no, it's quite brilliant.
Well, I had a similar engine where I was trying to get them to put, say, the number 13 on a shirt.
Yep.
And it kept putting the number 3 on it. And so, no, can you have another go at doing the 13?
Well, spelling errors is the other one. For some reason, it likes to do spelling errors. And you think, surely of any tool that's available, something that's got the dictionary available to it could get everything spelt right. But it might put a word in there twice in an image and it spells it differently. So I tend to ask for my images now with no words, with no letters, with nothing, because I know it's going to have a spelling error somewhere, and you can't just go and say, fix up that one little spelling error.
Well, sometimes the characters don't even look like actual normal characters.
Yeah, correct. So it might be, these might be deliberate things to make it a bit of a flag to say, hello, AI did this, see, look at the way that letters are written. So having said that, I still do use it. I still find it quite effective. Get rid of the flags, get rid of the words in there, and then what it produces is actually quite good. And I tend to ask for cartoon images myself, because when you do ask for lifelike images, it gives you lifelike images with some little annoying flaws. We've talked about it before, with fingers missing or hands back to front, that type of thing.
Yeah.
When you ask for cartoons, it doesn't matter.
There's a world of forgiveness.
Because cartoons, there's not many cartoon characters you can think of that have got a full hand, for example.
Yeah.
Obviously, people drawing cartoons back in the 30s or 40s when Walt Disney was drawing cartoons, they obviously went, damn, these hands are hard to draw. Let's just make all our characters have 3 fingers or 3 digits on the end of their whatever. In gloves, that's right. So now, having said all that, you don't have to have the subscription model now. You get 2 images per day. You can use just normal ChatGPT, the completely free one, and you can go and say, please draw an image that does this. Or the other one that's a bit of a favourite of mine, if I've got an article that I've written and I want to post that with a picture, I'll say, please read this article and draw an appropriate picture for it. So then just give me something that matches that. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it tries to include everything that I've mentioned in that one article in one picture. It becomes a bit of a mess then. But more often than not, it gets something that's good enough for me to post with and use that particular image. So if you're using ChatGPT, go there, try it with some images, try asking for some different images, try and be creative with what you're asking for just to see what you can come up with. There seems to be a bit of a trend with spacesuits, animals going into space, going to the moon, that type of thing, which always looks quite amusing. But it's something you can use for other things like creating a business card, creating a logo for a business, just things like that where you would have had to pay a graphic artist, my apologies to graphic artists out there, a decent amount of money to come up with some sort of logo or image. Now you can just do something quite quickly and use that. So interesting. Have a look at it, have a play with it. And I think the idea here is you'll love it so much that you want to go and do the paid version.
Yeah. Now here's a headline for you. A significant number of consumers do not actually read instruction manuals. I bet you didn't know that. Think about it, folks, though. When was the last time you actually bought an appliance, a machine or a gadget, and you actually read the manual as well? Clearly, the planet doesn't implode if you skip the reading bit and go straight to the playing, but manuals are written for a reason. Matt, is there another option that will save some strife here?
Well, I think we should write manuals better for a start. I blame solicitors for the manuals we've got now. No apologies to any solicitors out there.
There's just
so many things they've got to put in there.
Yep.
You have a manual to buy a cup of coffee because the coffee might be hot,
Yep.
and you might scald yourself with the coffee.
Yeah.
So you read some manuals, and I've played around with it sometimes. I don't read many manuals. I prefer to get in and play.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll do it. I'll get a new car, for example. I might just flick through, and some of the stuff that's written is just so tedious.
Yes.
There's so much written there to cover every possibility of everything that might happen because there's a solicitor waiting somewhere to sue someone.
So what happens is we skip through that bit, and the one bit that might be really important, you've just skipped over anyway because of all the other fat that you had to read through.
That's right. So I think it's a bit of an insult to any, and I'll be sexist here, any male out there. You can't tell a male that he can't drive a car because every male's an expert driver, and you can't tell a male that he needs to read the instruction manual. It's a bit like maps.
Yeah.
You'll sit in a car and your darling wife will say, let's look on the maps, and I'm going back before smartphone days. Let's get the Gregory's out. Let's look at a map. What? I know where we're going. Even if it'll take me 3 times as long as it should, I'll get us there. So I think with manuals...
Can I just share, I was reminded of when I saw this story of a friend that I had in high school, and his parents wouldn't allow him to ride his new motorbike. He got a new motorbike for his birthday. Wasn't allowed to ride it until he had read the manual cover to cover.
Did they test him on that? How did they know he read it cover to cover?
Well, I reckon they tested him. Those sorts of parents, right?
That's probably sensible things. They probably said,
but still,
don't ride too fast. I know.
There it is, sitting right in front of you. You can't touch it until you've read it.
And this is the thing. I think males in particular like to just get in and have a crack at it. Get in there and
that's right.
play with that video
Learn
recorder.
by doing.
Yeah, that's right. Which means you sometimes miss out on some cool features, but at least you're into it and you're doing it and discovering it. But there's some times that maybe it's worthwhile reading the manual. So, for example, I'm a nuclear physicist working on a nuclear power plant. Manual. Let's just give it a crack and see how we go.
Let's start flicking switches.
That's right. Surely, if something's going to happen, there'll be a red light somewhere that'll go off.
For sure.
So there are some manuals where they kind of recommend engineers in particular do read them when you've got for example, the energy sector, the grid, when you've got industrial software, when you've got industry, when you've got a car manufacturing plant, a whole range of things. It's a pretty good idea.
It's situations where you hope someone has read the manual.
Someone, please, someone. So now that someone is AI, because there's a new company called Aviva, and essentially what it does is it reads manuals for companies. Now, Schneider Electric is the parent company, so Schneider Electric's very big in wind, lots of electric things they do, but in wind turbines. And again, that'd be one of those things that you think, maybe someone should read the manual. So Aviva does do that. Aviva reads the manual, and then, and you start to think about it, it can read the manual, absorb, ingest, have all that information, because if I'm an engineer and I read that manual, I'm probably not going to remember everything perfectly. I'm probably have to go back and refer to things, because I remember reading something about when this happened. I'll just go back and find that manual. Where is it?
It
oh,
takes
here
a
it is.
photographic memory to remember it all, doesn't it? Yeah,
that's right. And so AI has got that. So the first thing it does is reads the whole manual. Then you can use it a couple of different ways. You can go and search. So basically it's just like a mini website. You can go and search that manual to find things, because it's read everything, and it can be asked questions in natural English. So you can say, I seem to have a problem with the turbine spinning too fast. What should I do about that? Okay, here's where the answer might be. But it's also got monitors on a lot of this equipment we're talking about. It's got monitors where it's continuously monitoring the equipment, and then it can say, hello, this is happening. I know, because I've read the manual, that means this, and we should take that action over there.
Okay.
The engineers are really just there to say, okay, that sounds like a good idea, because you read the manual. Is it going to get down to the stage where you'll have an AI tool to get the manual for your new piece of electronic equipment you get in the house, and you say, read the manual and tell me what I need to know? And it's funny, because sometimes I've said to people, can you just go and have a quick look through these rules for this thing I've got to do and just tell me anything I need to know? And then I've done that, and what I end up doing is reading the stuff myself anyway, because how do they know what I need to know?
That's right.
Why didn't you tell me this part? I didn't think you needed to know that part. Well, that's important. So you just have that recall of things. So you get AI to read the manual for you. Tell me what I need to know from that. Well, does it know what you need to know? That's a bit of a confusion part. So there's a couple of things that are quite interesting. One of them is looking at video footage of engineers explaining different processes, and then based on that, it'll write some basic instructions for someone new to come along. But probably my favourite is one that basically watches what you do on a computer. So a bit like a macro in Excel. Click, 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 do these 10 things. We call that as a macro. It actually watches what you do. So, for example, I know one client that I do a little bit of work with where they've got this ridiculously complicated process they've got to go through, where one person in the organisation knows how to do it, where it's a claim process, and there's just all these different little apps I've got to go to, and it's a kind of a 5-step thing to do that, and then add this claim, and then check it on a month later. And I said, you need to teach someone else how to do that, because you get hit by a bus or you have a sick day. How does someone else know to do it? Oh, it's too hard. It's too complicated. So there's a little tool out now called Scribe, and what it does is it watches what you do on a computer, and then it writes a manual based on those steps. So I like that one.
Yeah, right.
So it can be something where it really is just watch what I do and learn from it to a human, but watch what I do and learn from it to an AI tool, and then write the instructions on how to do that. So I like that one.
Very clever.
And just to give you an idea of how much they're absorbing, there's another company, SCG Chemicals, that's also playing with Aviva. They've got 14 million documents for all their different chemicals they produce and the different interactions of those that someone needs to know something about. Now, obviously, you wouldn't read all 14 million documents. You'd reference the ones that you need to know about. But guess what? AI can read 14 million documents, and it can have all that information.
Before lunch.
Before lunch, that's right. And not even take a lunch break. And so it can then locate the necessary information pretty quickly. So it's quite fascinating, the access to information that we're getting now, because we've got AI to be able to absorb some of this information.
And do the real thinking.
And do the real thinking, probably.
Now, variable speed limits are an important part of traffic management, particularly in the very high-density areas of big cities. Traffic snakes are frustrating, as is an 80-kilometre limit on a freeway that just seems to be pretty clear. So in a bid to keep commuters happy and keep the busy roads moving smoothly, AI is literally driving the change, Matt.
driving the change. There's apparently a 27-kilometre section of the I-24 freeway near Nashville. I'm not familiar with it.
No, you haven't been on it?
Don't think I've been on
Okay.
it. Maybe I have, but I don't remember it in particular. But it's a busy freeway. You start getting to the point in high traffic times when you've got 2,000 vehicles per lane per hour. So it seems like a fair few to me, especially when you've got multiple lanes. And there are some magic numbers. When you get a certain number of vehicles per lane on a freeway, on a highway, then you get to the stage where the traffic reacts poorly to any change. So anyone slows down a little bit, then as you say, that sort of
That traffic snake where people slow down and then unnecessarily so.
I watched a
Concertinas.
great. That's right. I watched a great episode of the Mythbusters one time where they actually tested that concertina effect, and it was fascinating. Yeah. A small change down the way, someone 5, 10, 20 cars in front of you, and how much of an impact it had back on you. So when you're going along a freeway at freeway speeds and you get this congestion, apparently there are some magic numbers when you get over a certain number of cars per hour, you should bring the speed limit down, because this whole concertina traffic snake concept gets out of control very quickly when you've got a lot of cars there. And it can lead to pile-ups. And I remember seeing one time years ago a pile-up on some American freeway, and it was a 50-car or 100-car pile-up. I went, how could you have that many cars piled up? I was thinking about traffic around Sydney. I'm thinking, you take 10 minutes to get
pea soup fog or something like that.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But what happens is when you start to get this many cars, and then you do get a bit of a concertina, and you get someone who slows down a bit, and then it banks up, and suddenly you do get so many cars because they're still coming in at high speeds. Yeah. What this particular AI tool does on this section of I-24 is it monitors the traffic, and there are variable speed traffic controls along this section. And as the traffic gets to the point where it's increasing the number of cars per hour, and or when you start to get a little bit of congestion occurring, so someone does start to slow down, which then has that concertina effect, then it automatically changes the speed limits. And what they found when they first started it was after 10 minutes it was a complete failure, because the AI was responding and taking it down to the speed it needed to be at instantly. So it sees an issue up ahead. So let's say it's, and I'm talking kilometres an hour here, not miles an hour, sorry to Americans, but let's say it's 110 k's an hour and a bit of a constant, so it drops it down to 40 k's an hour. And so you can imagine you're driving along at 110, what, 40?
Yeah, 40.
What am I doing?
Yeah,
the
skids.
Is that, well, do I hit the brakes, or do I think that's just a mistake and I'll ignore it? Because surely this is 110, so it wouldn't need to be 40, and then you suddenly come up against all this traffic, this congested traffic. So that was a complete failure after about 10 minutes. So they then found we've got to make sure that it actually does it in smaller increments. So it can get to 40 if it needs to get to 40, but do it by just going for a few small ones as it goes down, and that will have a better impact on traffic flow. Then when the traffic eases up a bit, they can start to increase that speed limit. So if I was driving on that section, it would be quite feasible for me to see a range of different speed limits as I drove along, and then obviously adjust that to the traffic. That's frustrating though as well. And I know in Australia we have the Blue Mountains. When you go from Sydney out west, you go to the Blue Mountains. Over a section of highway that goes for about 60 kilometres, there is something like 40, and don't quote me on this, but about 40 different speed limits in that section.
60, 80, 60, 40.
All
60,
over the place.
80.
And the thing that I find with that is back in the old days when you didn't have a car that would pick up the speed limit as you drove, then you felt like you were looking for speed signs more than you're looking at the road ahead, because you knew that there were different changes, and so it became frustrating.
It's so easy to get caught out.
And the whole safety aspect of it as well. Obviously, the speed limits are in place for a reason. So this all makes sense to have these variable speed limits. I think we'll see more of this, but the other thing, of course, once we get autonomous cars, it won't be so bad. You won't get the concertina effect, and you'll get cars driving at the speed limit, because they'll know what the speed limit is. And if it changes, they'll all be able to drive down to that lower or increase to that higher speed limit.
But out here in the country, we don't have much problem with peak hour traffic at all, I've got to say. But I know the frustration in Sydney when you do get that concertina effect and you're on that freeway, and for some reason you'll find yourself slowing down from 100 down to 40 or whatever, and it just can't work out what's going on. And it's because of some sort of thing that has happened a small pause at the front of the queue there that has caused that traffic snake. And I just think, if you drop down the speed limit to 80, if you've got AI doing that, and everyone's travelling at 80, there's a frustration there that you feel like, we should be going 100. This road's 100 usually.
Yeah.
But it's much less of a frustration than when you're slowing down to 40 and you cannot see any reason why.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing I find fascinating, I remember being a kid in the car and we're at traffic lights and they turned green and we were 6 or 7 cars back and we took 5 or 10 seconds to go. And I remember saying to Dad, so why don't we all just go when it's green? Wouldn't it make sense for us all to just go rather than wait until the car in front of us goes? And he said, yep, that's a great idea, son, except you just have one in the queue that would be looking down at the radio, push button on the push button radio when it went green, and then there'd be a little bump from the back of the car behind them, and then it'd be all. So you've just got to wait till that car in front of you moves away, and then you can do it safely as well.
Everyone plays perfectly,
which is never going to happen.
You just have to go with
until we're all autonomously driven around.
Yeah. Hydrogen-powered flight has hit our bulletins several times recently, and so it should. The aviation industry is one of, if not the biggest contributor, in pumping fossil-fuelled carbon into the atmosphere. So a revolution in aviation technology is long overdue. Matt, you've got some new developments and some predictive dates on this topic to share, which should bring a sense of hope to frequent flyers.
Well, let's go first of all, because I think there's something here I want to explore a little bit further that I don't always agree or don't particularly agree with some of the predictions in this one. But for a start, they're talking about Sweden could see commercial hydrogen flights as early as 2028. And that's still 4 years away.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, it could
be
which
part of 2028. Yeah, but it seems like it's a long way away, 4 years. But to develop planes with hydrogen fuel tanks to get up in the air and fly and make everyone on board comfortable and safe with what's happening there, that sounds like it's not that far away. They are also talking that by 2045, basically all short-range flights will be powered by hydrogen. And this is where I am not convinced that this is the case. I think that short-range flights, and I'm talking about, say, less than 500 kilometres, I think a lot of those will be powered by electric planes rather than hydrogen planes because we've talked about them before. Yeah. Some of those short flights, you can get enough length or enough time in the air with batteries on there that it doesn't become ridiculously heavy. When batteries start to fall over, electric planes start to fall out of the skies when you just have to have so many batteries to get you that length of flight that it becomes so heavy that you've got to build a bigger plane and then you need more power to keep running that plane in the air, and so you need bigger batteries, and it just becomes this whole process that you're going to spiral to not getting that plane off the ground. So I always had in mind that those short flights would be electric. When you get to the long international flights, the Sydney to LA type flights, some of those flights I can't see them being anything else but jet fuel for decades to come. But maybe that's where hydrogen will eventually fit in, because hydrogen has one huge advantage over jet fuel. It's got more energy per kilogram. The only issue is it's more spacious, more vacuous. What's the right word for that? It takes up a greater volume. So that becomes a bit of an issue because you've got to store it somewhere. And, of course, then they start talking about storing it in a very cold form, so minus 250 degrees is a common number that they use. So
I think, though, it's a big call to say anything is going to remain status quo for decades to come, though. I just think new ideas just come out of the blue, and that's what we've covered so much of in these podcasts. But, I think, at this stage, there is no foreseeable solution to the long-range flights.
Not at this stage, no, but I think hydrogen might be there. But in this particular story, they're talking about the fact that hydrogen-powered flights would cover all air travel within a 1,200-kilometre radius. And I still think those shorter flights will be done via electric. I could be completely wrong on that, but I thought electric might be a more sensible option.
Comes down to what the CEOs can be convinced of.
Well, that's exactly right. And we did talk recently, mentioned that we had a meeting with a CEO from a major airline, and they talked about the fact that SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, would be what they'd be using for those long-haul flights instead of jet fuel, for example. But that's expensive, and there's a whole range of issues with that at this stage. But it's quite fascinating. Hydrogen's being developed. So at this stage, they've got tanks, as I mentioned before, minus 250 degrees Celsius. That's the sort of temperature you want to keep them at so that you can have a lower volume as you get it obviously very cold But storing it at minus 250, well, that's a bit tricky because, sure, up in the air when you're flying, it might be minus 60 degrees outside, but it's not minus 250 degrees outside. So in that tank, you've got to keep it at minus 250. And then I do wonder whether or not the actual wings are going to be an appropriate place to store that, like it is with jet fuel now. That's all stored in the wings. Is that an appropriate place to store the hydrogen? Because you've got to make something different in terms of the shape to store it in those tanks. Maybe those flat type tanks that you've got in a current wing, maybe that's not appropriate to store something that's got to be either high pressure or very low temperature.
Ideally, a spherical container.
Yeah, so you think that'd be better. So they might change the shape of planes. We might see planes with maybe a bulb across the top of them.
Like a bumblebee or something like that.
Yeah, probably something like that. So we've got super cold hydrogen, or liquid hydrogen. It's potentially going to be used, but the other question is, how will they use it? In other words, will they use it through some type of fuel cell to convert that to electricity so that your plane's effectively an electric plane, or will they use that to effectively burn the hydrogen through something that we would consider to be a jet engine now? And the jury's out on that as well. And I think there'll be solutions for both of those depending on the length of that flight, how big that plane is, a whole range of different options.
So planes will be powered by rockets.
That sounds like more fun, doesn't it? If we get to this transition we're talking about, you'll need about 100 million tonnes of hydrogen. Now, that's another challenge because there's no point producing hydrogen via some sort of energy that's requiring burning of fossil fuels. So you want green hydrogen, 100 million tonnes. I can't tell you how many tonnes are produced of green hydrogen at this stage across the world, but I can tell you it's nowhere near 100 million tonnes. So there'd be a lot of changes needed to get to that point as well. So it's interesting, it's changing, it's exciting, but we're not quite there yet.
Perhaps someone out there could maybe work on some cold fusion, perhaps.
That'd be quite fascinating. Sounds like something like Back to the Future, doesn't it? Mr. Fusion, and away you go.
In the digital age, at a time where our paranoia glands keep us on high alert and checking over our shoulders with every tap, click and swipe, this next story will do nothing to alleviate your anxiety, folks. For those of you who are worried about Bill Gates microchipping the population with vaccines, consider for just one moment the revealing information that is being generated by the GPS on your phone, your car or your laptop. Matt, I see that you have a fistful of bad news right there for the paranoid people and conspiracy theorists.
You don't need to have the chip installed, do you?
No,
everyone's
it's too
willingly
late for that.
That's right. Everyone's willingly walking around with a device in their hand that is
whispering all your deepest, darkest secrets.
I remember there was a guy in Canberra years ago, and he was coming up with an idea for an emergency radio. He was trying to sell this idea for people to have an emergency radio. So if there was a bushfire or there was some disaster was happening, everyone would have their emergency radio and it would pick up this signal and they'd all be alerted across the nation. He thought he was going to change the nation in terms of safety. And I said, have you heard of a thing called a mobile phone? Surely we've already got the emergency radio. If you don't have a mobile phone, there's going to be someone near you that's going to have a mobile phone. Get the carriers to agree, which they've basically done this now, get the carriers to agree to be able to send out messages, a bit like a text message, if you like, and then away you go. And actually in Japan, I remember being in Japan, and it was Korea or Japan I was in recently, and they actually do an alert that pops up on your phone. So a similar sort of thing with the carriers so that you can do that. And they do some tests of it. That'd be cool if we did a test here. I can't remember us doing any tests here.
Tsunami tests here out in the Central West?
Well, yeah, probably not too many of those. But just they do some testing where they get an alert to say, this is going to be a test, the next one that comes, and then they do a test so that you're familiar with it. So that all sounds like it makes sense. So we've got these phones, and they're doing lots of cool things for us, but they're also doing some scary things. The GPS, as we know, GPS became much more accurate when they changed the signalling, because there was a deliberate, when it wasn't used for military purposes, there was a deliberate process to make them just a little bit less accurate. That's all gone now. They're incredibly accurate. So they did some tests. This is the Indian Institute of Technology. And they did some tests where they said, let's look at the data from GPS signals from phones, because there's 40 different metrics. I can't tell what they all are. Obviously, your latitude, your longitude, your altitude, and a bunch of other stuff that tells you, or tells not you, but tells someone looking for this data, incredibly accurately what you are, not just where you are, but what you're doing. So are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you laying down? Are you active at the moment?
Yeah.
Based on your movements, and they did some tests where they did it in busy locations. So they did it in a university dorm, they did it in a sports stadium. They could actually draw a floor plan of that location based on the movement of phones around inside there, because the phones were so accurate. They could work out that no one went along this particular section here because there's a wall there. No one walked through that section because there's a wall there. Now, I don't know whether it would be accurate enough to draw a floor plan of your house, because presumably you don't have thousands of people going through your house on a regular basis, and maybe just you and your family, there's not enough data from those to draw a floor plan. But you could draw a basic floor plan. You could draw the basic room. So if someone thinks, I'm going to break into this house, well, I already know what the floor plan basically looks like, because I've been able to pick that up from some of the GPS data. They're calling it a vulnerability on Google phones, but I'm not sure if it's a vulnerability or if it's by design, because you want it to be accurate. I like it when I get my phone out, I'm trying to go somewhere, and it says cross the road, because the place you're going to is on the other side of the road, and it knows that I'm on the wrong side of the road. Even it doesn't have to be a big 10-lane highway. It can just be a single-lane road, and it will tell me to cross the road because it knows accurately enough where I am at the moment. It's also wonderful when you can look on Google Maps and see congested roads, and that's all done with metadata or feeding in to say there seems to be a lot of phones here and they're going slowly, therefore these areas congested.
There's a lot of good to be had, and a lot of people like myself just prefer to think about what good we're getting out.
Good work.
So stories like this, can you just keep to yourself?
Radio. So just wipe this last little section here.
I keep saying it. There is something about the sound of a vinyl record as it translates through a meaty set of speakers that just gets your juices simmering. It's exactly how Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all their brothers and sisters of the 70s and 80s are supposed to be heard. I always felt like CDs were a form of snake oil. They were exciting for a while, and I bought into them at the time for sure, but everyone did. But a new CD just didn't have the smell or give the same sensation when that needle drops on the vinyl. Like a pair of favourite blue jeans, vinyl is here to stay, and the sales figures will back me up, Matt.
Not just here to stay, it's increasing. I don't get it. Now, do you think if you took a brand new record that hasn't got some scratches on there already, do you think if you started playing a lovely Zeppelin song on that compared to playing it via CD or streaming in the same set of speakers, so I'd hear what you're saying about a nice big meaty set of speakers, do you think sitting there having a blind test...
Would you be able to tell the difference? No, but when I know it's vinyl, I go, this is vinyl.
And maybe you could tell it was vinyl because the quality's not as good, but then I'm going to offend a whole bunch.
And there's probably some older guy playing it for me too, and so you just, hey, listen to this.
That's right.
And it's like, oh, thanks, mate.
That's right. And normally the way I know it's a record or a vinyl record is because it sounds a bit scratchy and it's got a few little things happening, or it gets to the end of a song and goes, did it, as it gets spinning around there.
But there's probably someone who's just told you they've put on a vinyl record as well, and that's part of it too.
Well, possibly. And I don't get it for a whole bunch of reasons. I must admit I don't pick the sound quality. I'm not enough of an audiophile. But I don't remember being younger when vinyl records were the go and saying, I like that new album from Floyd. I'm just going to go for a run with that album and listen to that. Or
just put up with the bumps and the scratches.
That's right.
How'd you carry this thing on your back?
Or a car, and I wouldn't, back when I was listening to records, I wouldn't have owned a car, but I don't remember Mum and Dad saying, that's a good song that you bought, kids, let's go and chuck that in the car and go for a drive.
There was a reason why the stereo was in the lounge room, and only the maybe in the bedroom as well. Yeah.
So you're right though, vinyl records are not only being sold, they're being sold in increasing numbers, and they're killing some other forms of physical ownership.
Well, whenever you tell a story like this, I always get surprised about how many people are still buying CDs.
Still buying. So get ready for this. 43 million vinyl records sold in the US alone last year.
I get it.
That's a lot. 37 million CDs. So people are still buying CDs.
What's that about?
I don't get that. If you love the sound quality of the vinyl, the CD is digital, so it's pretty much the same as streaming, you would think. So could you really pick the difference
CD
in quality?
and streaming, is there much of a difference there? So just stream it.
Yeah, just stream it. That's
and
right.
it's just got to be boomers.
Possibly.
Because they CDs are something they can understand, perhaps.
So when you start to talk about dollars now, this is what scares me. Vinyl sales generated $1.4 billion in revenue, so it's still a decent market there. Digital downloads, not streaming, digital downloads. So I want to buy that song, which I'm not sure if you really own it, whether the artist still owns that, but I'm going to buy that song. I don't need to be subscribed to some streaming service. Only made up $434 million worth of sales. So
I didn't know there was still ability to buy a song.
well, maybe that's part of the reason it's only a small number.
Yeah.
But that's quite incredible that vinyl effectively sold about $1 billion more of music than digital downloads. But then, of course, the king is streaming, $14.4 billion. But even that means that vinyl is about 10% of the streaming market in dollars. That just seems, I thought vinyl, if you said to me it was 1%, I'd be surprised, but it's 10%.
So you're claiming fake news here then? Is that it?
No, this is not fake news. This is real news, but surprising real news. And the other part that kind of makes it seem more realistic is that of all the vinyl records sold in the US last year, 7% were Taylor Swift. So
of course they were Taylor Swift.
one artist can make a difference. So if Taylor decided, that's it, I'm done with vinyl now, that'd be a bit of a drop in those
She
sales.
has
figures.
become something beyond a phenomenon.
She has. Even when she was in Australia last year, earlier this year,
Yeah.
when she went to a city like Melbourne, not just a little pokey city, Melbourne, essentially our two biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, about the same sort of population, 4.5 million people, she changed the economy for that city.
It's crazy.
Unbelievable. So the interesting part there is that some people, so forget the tail of 7% for a minute, some people do like the vinyl for the artwork. So they like to have the vinyl record to buy that for the artwork, but I still think they could probably buy the artwork without the vinyl record. It's a lot of expense to go to just for the artwork.
Got to be lounge rooms out there with these enormous shelves. Lounge rooms that were built in the 70s and 80s, and they've got these shelves that are designed for the width of a vinyl record.
That's right. Perfect width.
They're lining these walls, and we're thinking, well, what can we get? Well, enough with the ornaments. Might as well put records on them.
Maybe that's... But I actually remember doing some IT work for a solicitor's firm years ago, and in the second floor of this building, they'd actually had the floor strengthened because you walked into the office of each solicitor and they had all their books with their legal precedents up on the shelves. Yeah. And I introduced them to a concept with a CD, good old-fashioned CD before DVD even, where all those precedents were on one CD. You had to subscribe and you got a new CD each year. And I remember the solicitor going, but look at all these books. Don't they look impressive when a client walks in and sits in
Sounds like
my
something
office?
Ron Burgundy would have said.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's right. It's like I've had the floor strengthened to keep all these books. What am I going to do with a CD? Why would I do that? Of course, it's much quicker to search and all the rest of it, but it's a bit like that. Maybe some people have got their shelves built for vinyl and they've just got to keep buying vinyl because what else would they do with those shelves?
Exactly.
You can't just sit a little MP3 player there, surely.
Yeah. If you're not one to buy into the hype of AI and have ever been dismissive of robotics, flipping it off as a passing fad, then what the hell are you listening to this podcast for? For those of you who claim that robots will never be able to play table tennis, for example, boy, are you about to get egg all over your face. Matt, you're a bit handy with a ping pong paddle. Do you fancy your chances against the robot that can play ping pong?
Today, yes.
Right.
But not for much longer. Now, I'm interested in ping pong. I used to always call it ping pong.
Yeah.
But the proper name was obviously table tennis. But is ping pong a universal term? Does everyone know what ping pong means? Is it an Aussie thing? Or?
Well, I'm going to assume that it's universal because I'm talking ping pong all through this.
Good work. Okay. Apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently the robotics industry standard for testing a robot and AI is ping pong.
Oh, it's becoming the SI unit for
basically, yes,
its ability.
Same as it's the King Edward Bible last week. This week it's the ping pong testing because there's a few things here. The first thing is you've got to strategize. You've got to think. You've got to go, I'm going to try and hit it away from the other player to try and make it hard for him or her.
You've also got to locate the ping pong that's on its way to you.
Correct. So you've got to analyse where the ball's coming and map out that ball, but it's also got some spin on it potentially. Yeah. So I've got to map it with a different trajectory than if it was just going through using just normal air resistance and gravity. So you've got to do all that.
But you've got latitude, longitude, and altitude. Yep.
And then on top of all that, you've got to physically get to it and hit it. Now, the robot that was doing this...
But also hit it in such a way that it has the trajectory to be able to clear the net and still land on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot in it.
There's a lot in it. That's exactly right. It seems like such a simple game when you just pick up a bat and say, let's have a quick hit, James.
But it's why some people are hopeless at it.
That's possibly why. Now, in this particular one, they took a robot and with all those things, and then the robot stands still, so it's not like you see in the Olympics where they're standing back 20 metres from the table tennis table and hitting it with such incredible force.
So it plays ping pong like Forrest Gump. Stand still and just belts the hell out of it.
It's a perfect example, actually. Excellent. A perfect one. So it stands there, it moves, it hits the ball, and they did some testing where they basically had 29 human players of various skill. They said, we'll get people of beginner, intermediate, advanced, and advanced plus. Not pro, not elite, advanced plus. And basically, out of all those different players, it won 45% of its matches. When it played against beginner level, it was basically beating those beginners every time. So it's pretty good. So someone picks up a bat, there's the robot, and it gets beaten. Intermediate level is about 55%. So it was still going pretty well. Once it got above intermediate, once it got above that to advanced plus, it didn't win any games, but it put up a contest at least. So it could still play against these players. But it started to get a bit tricky. But when you start to think about ping pong and a robot doing that, then maybe finally my dream of a robot that'll pick up the kids' clothes off the floor, if it can hit ping pong ball,
one step closer.
We're surely got to be. Surely.
And that'll be a new international standard unit.
How many clothes it can pick up? That's right.
How accurately it can clean up a room.
Yeah. So it's the next thing I think for it is to be able to get to the stage where, a bit like playing chess, you can get the best chess player in the world, play against a computer, and basically it's a pretty good contest and the computer probably wins most of the time. When the robot gets to that, then people will go, yeah, look at that. I've got this robot because it's got a lot of information to absorb and then react. And even though we do it as humans, robots are still getting there, but not quite there yet.
For sure. Okay, folks, I'm going to bare my soul to you now. One of the hazards of being a teacher is that there is a high risk of picking up the bad habits of students. The human psyche morphs according to the culture that it is immersed in. Now, I'm a Gen Xer, and I've defended sound grammar and punctuation on a battlefield of marking work samples, and I've defended it with my blood, sweat and tears. But now I fear to say that sadly, whenever I put an unerasable pen to paper, capital letters become a thing of convenience, commas go anywhere, and a sentence is no longer a sentence. I have been ruined, and this is my lived experience. Now consider, then, that AI chatbots communicate from what they learn on the internet. The use of AI chatbots is well and truly commonplace now. So, Matt, what are the predictable outcomes of chatbots infiltrating social media and presenting their own influence on how we do and say things and behave?
It's all bad. It's all bad. Is there a term? I want to either find a term or make up a term here that's the way we spell with texting now. Text spell. Is text spell a thing or something like that?
Well, I've been opposed to it. It is definitely a thing. Yep. It started with great.
Yes.
GR8. And then it just got worse. But I'd write in full sentences with full stops and whatnot. And I make a point of it. My problem is when I put pen to paper, though, you can't just change what you can't correct the stuff that you've done. It just gets messy. And and it's because I've immersed myself in people who don't get it right. And
I get it with my kids who will send me a text message and I'll say, you didn't put any capitals. Like, it's a simple thing, but just use a capital letter for someone's name. Yep. And they say, well, that's an extra keystroke. Why would I bother?
And that word had no vowels in it. And get a vowel in it, please.
That's right, please, somewhere. So there is a thing, as you say, there's a thing with text spell where that started to creep into normal language, normal written word rather than just on a text message. And it's not so important anymore. It used to be the limit of how many characters we had for a text message. We had to cut it down, but we don't have that problem anymore. We can write longer text messages. The interesting thing here is that there's some researchers that have been talking about how ChatGPT, how conversations will start to change as we interact with things like AI and ChatGPT in particular more and more. And we've talked about it before that I still say please and thank you. And I'm going to now, after having looked at this story, I'm going to keep doing that even more so, not just because one day they'll remember I was nice to them, but also because I want to try and treat the conversation. Well, I need to teach them. Well, that's a good point too. But I want to treat the conversation as if I was having the conversation with a human. I would always say please and thank you if I was talking to a human. Sure. So why not? One of the things that the researchers are talking about is the fact that it will make us more abbreviated in the way we speak, because if I'm typing something to get ChatGPT to search something, for example, I don't need to put the full sentence really, do I? If I want to know what year the Yankees won the World Series, I can just say Yankee World Series year. Yep. It's not a sentence that I would normally say to anyone, but I'm pretty confident AI will work it out for me.
Yep.
That's right. That's all I need in there. So why not do that? But if I start doing that, then I see you down the street and I go, Yankee World Series year. And you go, what are you talking about, Matt?
So 1973.
That's all good, thank you. One of the things they talk about is it potentially will make people a bit socially awkward, make people a bit impatient because they don't want to have to go and type up all the words they need, and potentially even sound rude because rather than, oh, James, do you remember what year, blah, 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 it'll just be the bits you need, and you go, gee, that's a bit abrupt, Matt. Just, could you ask me nicely? So that's one of the things that they say. And here's a word that
you won't know about this until you've lived with adolescents for a while, I think, because adolescents are going to pick up on this earlier.
They are, and we probably won't know about it ever because we'll just be in the middle of it and not realising that we ourselves are doing it.
Yeah.
So apparently, what will happen is we will anthropomorphise. How's that for a word?
I've heard that. I know that word.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
And I think that's what we effectively do when you talk about
anthropomorphism, yep.
When we talk about how we adapt to others' language around us.
Well, if you talk to any etymologist, they would talk about the anthropomorphism has been going forever, as long as we've been speaking. And so, language just changes. It's an evolving thing. And some people like to guard jealously language, but we don't speak like a Shakespearean.
Like Shakespeare.
Yeah,
that's right. And did people in Shakespeare's time speak like Shakespeare?
Really did that.
But I know your point.
We can only assume.
We do say things a bit differently now to what we did many years ago, and so things change, but this is probably going to make it change a bit quicker. We are learning to have conversations with ChatGPT, though. It's got a response time of about 232 milliseconds now, which is not far off a human response time. And again, we're clever. We are so clever, James. The more we do this podcast, the more I realise how clever we are. We can absorb some information that someone says to us, look through our database of information, come up with a sensible response, and then say that. And we can do all that in less than 232 milliseconds. So that's pretty impressive. ChatGPT is probably looking through more information than we've got access to, though. So that's pretty impressive. But the other part is then, as you said, that feedback loop. So as people change the way they speak and the languages they use, then ChatGPT will change the way it gives answers. And so then it'll start to basically self-perpetuate that both will have that feedback loop on themselves, and you'll get a language that is probably cut back, truncated. It'll probably still have correct grammar and spelling, but it'll just be abbreviated. And I think that's where we're really going with all of this, that we'll just get this abbreviated language, which in 10 years' time we won't recognise it. Look at that old book, this book of 20,000 words. That's really only a 15,000 word book. It's got all these and ands and theys and all that sort of thing.
Look, I get tense when I see the word there written wrong, in the wrong way.
Please,
what's
spare
another
me.
one? Your is another one.
Yeah.
But
actually, that is possibly the worst one on social media. The amount of times I see you, and I want to say sometimes when I see a stupid comment from someone, I go, I'm ignoring your comment because it's stupid, but also until you get the right I'm not going to read it any further.
The best replies is just when someone just replies with the correct version of and that's all the reply says. So there's big long spiel, a big rant about what they've done, and they've just corrected the
Yeah, that's right.
The other one, look, IMA, IMMA, is short for I am going to. And I just, and there's a couple of others there. Yeah. Anyway.
But when you think about it, it is an abbreviated way of doing a whole range of things.
I know. And the English language changes.
And initialisms as well. Initialisms are exactly like that.
Cranky old buggers like me are just going to have to deal with it.
That's right.
All right, folks, that's all there is today, and that is left for us. Well, sorry, all that's left for us now to do is to move the crowd on, clean up the confetti and the streamers and the peanut husks, so we can do it all again next week. Thanks for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
Ping pong has been pretty significant in our computer world, hasn't it? One of those first video games was good old-fashioned Pong, wasn't ping pong, with a very basic screen moving back and forth. And now we're getting a stage.
For hours.
Yeah, now we're getting a stage where robots are playing ping pong. So I'm going to practice because when that robot gets better, I don't want to be beaten by a robot. So I'm getting out there, and I haven't got a ping pong table. I'm going to go and buy one just so I can practice to beat the robots.
All right, you and me both. It's a bold effort to stay one step ahead. Well, thanks for tuning in once again, folks. Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson is a deliciously savoury podcast, well complemented with a large glass of a peppery Shiraz and a well-aged vintage cheddar. Stay tuned for more serving suggestions in future weeks. I've been your host, James Eddy, and as always, it's a delight to bring you a brand new episode of Tech Talk each week. We hope that you'll fit us into your busy schedule next week, and why not bring a friend along for the ride? There's plenty for all. In the meantime, have a lovely week, and we'll see you then.